Yeah, I thought Indiana was bad. Texas, I think, is gonna end up one-upping them. Although there's a lack of the sensationalism in this one. It's still a little bit wacky. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton is, yes, suing the Biden administration over his attempts to get an order passed for emergency care for abortions in emergency rooms. So I know that we've been talking a lot, like not just we as the nonprofits, but we as like the United States of America have been talking a lot about the Roe versus Wade thing and abortion ever since everything came down. But it seems like it's getting worse. It's kind of steamrolling and it's going to get worse before it gets better. So this is an important conversation to have. Here we have two articles. One is from npr.org, and the other one is from the New York Post, and they both discuss Texas Ken Paxton suing Biden over his emergency abortion order. So here's the deal: we have some states where abortions are not legal, some states where it is, and from what I understand, there's no state that says you are not allowed to cross state borders as of right now, but that legislation is in progress to make it illegal to cross state borders to get an abortion. So you have people with different access um to medical services based on what state they live in. And this order will make it so that hey, if it's an emergency and you're going into an emergency room, all emergency care has to be provided, and that would include abortions. So Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton doesn't really like that. He thinks that that is not okay. And there's a lot of going back and forth, but this is one more. Oh, it's one more tactic, it's one more drop in the pond of all this just, "Let's steamroll over everybody and every little thing that involves abortion. Let's make it as evil, horrible, terrible as possible." Um, to the point where now we have government agencies fighting government agencies, and that to me is just a little bit concerning. What do you guys think about this? Erin, what do you think?
I'm gonna get all fired up again about this one.
Uh-oh, I mean Nate. No, no, go ahead.
Treating a person who is possibly in a life-threatening situation in an ER is exactly what an ER is supposed to do. Like, legally, that's their job, is to treat life-threatening situations with the appropriate care. And so this entire case is an attempt to deny the fact that abortion is healthcare, and to completely deny the reality of the fact that there are so many situations that can present at an ER where the therapeutic response is to terminate the pregnancy. I don't know if these people just completely failed out of grade 9 health class, or like what it is. The nuance is not there. The hyperbolic language is there. They said something like they were wanting to turn every ER into a walk-in abortion clinic. This is again this idea to control this whole narrative that people who seek abortions are irresponsible and degenerates. There is no legitimate reason why a woman who, with a wanted pregnancy or not, ends up at an ER where the appropriate response may be an abortion, and it could be life-threatening. And so to even make any kind of effort to deny that person treatment is necessarily a death sentence. And I don't know why people aren't seeing that. It's my understanding that this point put out by the Biden administration was just reaffirming a current law. So there's nothing new about it. It's just, again, this chance to seize on the narrative and twist it to the agenda of this completely hyperbolic idea that abortion is murder, and that there's no reasonable excuse for why somebody might present in an ER and need to terminate a pregnancy. And it's frustrating for me, because I mean, I can think of 10 off the top of my head. As a woman who has had children, who has had a miscarriage, who has had other issues, I can think of 10 off the top of my head of reasons why I might end up in the ER, and why I did end up in the ER throughout the times of my childbearing years, where there was an issue, and abortion would have been one of the things that would have been brought up. And I can't imagine a politician stepping into my consultation room with a doctor and telling my doctor when emergency is an emergency. and trying to make to try to overstep that authority on my doctor. So to me, it's just absolute bullshit.
Nate, what are your thoughts on this?
I am just getting really sick of seeing middle-aged white men pontificating about what women should do. I mean, I love doing the nonprofits, but it's just like, oh my God, it just keeps going and going and going. Like, when does this craziness stop? And let me just say, for the record, that this is not the first time that this Ken Paxton guy has come across my radar. When I was doing my notes for the show, I was like, I seem to remember a little something. So if we could perhaps put this lunatic lawsuit in context, with another example of Ken Paxton's litigious lunacy, in a move described by the Florida Attorney General's office as batshit insane, in 2021, Ken Paxton sued the states of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin over alleged irregularities in the election process. So to be clear, legal authorities in Florida described your legal strategy as batshit insane. So the state that brought you "Don't Say Gay" and warning letters to parents whose children might be going on a field trip with a suspected queer thinks you're crazy. That is the yardstick by which Ken Paxton is being measured. It's batshit crazy.
So this just shows how deeply entrenched the battle lines are, like just how separated the divide is. So we talked in the last segment about how, like, oh, you can't make this small compromise for these very specific situations. Like, you don't want any language that will allow, like, you want to basically force a 10-year-old to give birth. Like, that's really how bad this is getting. And then now you have this where it just exacerbates that point even further, where it's not grasping for straws, although that's kind of what I want to say, but it's worse because it's more diabolical. It's not just that they're grasping for any little thing; it's that they are fighting tooth and nail to ensure that they don't even give an inch. And what's interesting to me is that this has gotten to the point where you can't even, for like, right now you can, thankfully, but they're pushing for, you can't even in an emergency situation get an abortion. Like, to not want to offer emergency services in an emergency room and to call it a walk-in abortion clinic. Let's unpack that a little bit. First of all, how many women end up pregnant? Of all those women who end up pregnant, how many elect to get an abortion or want to get an abortion? The percentage of just pregnant women who want abortions is not big, people. It's not a lot. We're not all running to clinics to get abortions left and right. There are lots of reasons why women want to get abortions, and we can discuss whether or not the reasons are quote unquote valid. I don't think it's any of my business what another person's reason is, but, like, okay, fine, Republican, let's have that discussion. But to then go so far as to say, no, even in an emergency situation, we don't want to encroach on states' rights to say that abortions are included in emergency services. That really shows both of these. If you take both of these articles together, they show a really dire lack of an ability to make any form of compromise whatsoever, to even look at the problem from a medical perspective or from a health and well-being perspective. It's entirely ideological, not even biblical, by the way. It's not biblical, but it's ideological and political, and it's something now that once they've decided, hey, this is how I feel, it's almost like there's no budging. They'll fight tooth and nail. And this is a really good example of that.
Yeah. It's the whole idea of that, not just going through with a fine tooth comb and looking for the discrepancies. It's finding the smallest speck of dust and then running with it and exploding it into a situation, changing and twisting the narrative so that it absolutely doesn't reflect the reality of what actually happens. It's not scientific. It is not fact-based. It's not evidence-based. It goes against the consensus in medical treatment. And all of it is to try to control this idea that people, like, even the whole language around turning every emergency room to a walk-in abortion clinic. What does that idea put in people's minds? A walk-in abortion clinic. Oh, it's some blue-haired liberal who's coming in and using abortion as birth control. that is all part of painting this picture of what the situation is rather than what it actually is. A woman presents to the ER and she reports she's 20 or she's 18 weeks pregnant and she has a fever and she has back pain, and it turns out she has a placental abruption and everything is going awry and she's at danger of going septic and there's still a heartbeat. What do you do in that situation? What do you do? She is about to have an emergent, life-threatening situation. What do? Do you call your lawyer? To me, the whole idea of calling looking to the politicians to decide what an emergency is rather than the doctors, that's like if I had a broken leg and I called my fucking real estate agent to ask for advice. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so to me, it's just absolutely overstepping the purview of their whole profession. And it's completely unethical and an act of intimidation. So
you talk about
the word
the
abortion
language,
doesn't
right?
even appear in the order. It's not even in there.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
That's how far they're willing to stretch this.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you made that point because I had that written in my notes, and I know that we get really like emotional and fired up. Probably most especially Erin and I.
Yeah.
So it's easy to miss those little details. But you're right. Like it doesn't even say abortion, but the thought that could be something that occurs, it really shows that there's this, like it almost feels like insanity to me. Like when I was first writing my notes and considering the articles, what I really wanted to say was like, what? Like it doesn't sound logical or rational. But then when you think about it in terms of like this sort of war, Erin brought up the language, and you talk about
it's a denial that abortion is healthcare, right?
One of the other things is calling abortion murder, like the murder of children, right? So now you're saying, oh no, the woman doesn't want to get a medical service performed on her. She doesn't want to have her health and well-being seen to. She actually just wants to kill a child. Like she wants to murder somebody, and you're going to let her get away with it, right? And so this way of looking at it, here's my question to you guys. It's hypothetical, but with it being so ideological, how do you even approach it with someone who thinks that? Like, we can do the whole, well, if you believe in your heart that abortion is murder, then don't go get an abortion, but don't you dare like regulate or tell another woman what she can and can't do. And I've heard that argument so many times. I've made that argument so many times. When it really comes down to it, what you're telling that person is, well, if I think murder is okay, I should be able to commit murder. And that's not what we think. And that's not what anyone is trying to do here. And so my question to you guys is, how do you approach something like this in a logical way to someone like this person who this is this attorney general's stance? Like I wouldn't even know how to address it. What do you guys think?
I don't want to jump in here again because I know I've been like all over this topic.
It's all yours, Erin. The floor is yours.
I in my own personal life, I've never talked to an attorney general about this, but I have spoken to people who are pro-life and who have that idea that abortion is murder. For me, it was just a very calm conversation about reality, about the education. Yes, I do believe the autonomy argument is the best philosophical argument towards it. But when you're talking to somebody who has a pro-life stance, we focus on these conversations about what is actually the reason why most people come into a hospital, maybe not seeking an abortion. Maybe they're there because they have a fever that's way through the roof and they have back pain and and then what if the doctor tells them that the safest thing to do is to terminate this pregnancy or you're going to die? Having those conversations and educating people about this different scenarios that actually happen and forcing in the nuance of this, because it is nowhere near black and white. I don't care who thinks it is black and white, nowhere near black and white. I've had people in my own life who have been in that situation, who are pro-life and have been in that awful decision of what to do. And there's no way to describe how horrible and how painful it is. So I don't know. For me, when it's a personal conversation, it's talking about actual stories and what actually happens, and sometimes offering things like suggestions of like statistics and actual stories. That's different than how I would have a conversation with somebody about religion. It is totally different because I do feel like in this situation, you do have to rely a little bit on the fact of relying on someone to have human compassion Because if they
Mhm.
lack complete compassion, then there's nothing to say about this. If they're completely ideological, then they're not going to change their minds. But for myself, I'm often talking to another woman, I'm often talking to another mother who has a strong position, and I will share with them stories that I've either heard of or have been, intimately involved with, somebody that I know personally. And it shifts the dial just ever so slightly. And that's all I can ask for, is just a slight shift of the dial to not be so hard-lined about it, because there is so much nuance to this conversation. And every single time a politician gets on the internet and calls people murderers or calls people abortion activists and deny the fact that they are just giving compassionate care to their patients, they are doing damage towards this conversation, and they're hurting people on their own side, even by denying them the humanity of the situation.
Nate, what are your final thoughts on this?
Well, this is going to come up in the fourth segment, but what I think this is a result and a part of what's happening in the United States. Like right now, you've got Clarence Thomas issuing a call to arms for candidate cases to overthrow cases like Obergefell, the right to contraception, even sodomy laws, because now by saying that the 14th Amendment and the right to privacy doesn't mean that in this originalist interpretation, he's basically come out and said, hey, bring us your cases, bring us your wackadoodie, batshit crazy lawsuits so that we can put them through and push them through while we still have power. This is what's happening. And this is why I think even idiots like Ken Paxton are just trying to grab their share of the limelight while they can. Whether or not this gets to the Supreme Court, they're just taking pot shots. They're throwing their shit at the wall and seeing what'll stick.
Yeah, I can
I
agree
agree.
to that. Yeah. It does cause a further divide politically, and it does make our nation much more fractured than it really needs to be. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It does kind of it feels like throwing darts at a wall, huh? Yeah.